Welcome back to another Soul Connection call with me, Safrianna Lughna, the Queer Spirit Guide, and Julie Wilson. Please introduce yourself to my audience because I'm a fangirl of you, honestly.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Julie Wilson. I work with people to help open their gifts and DNA activations. I love to give energy updates to the collective to just help us shift through what we're going through in present time. Sometimes the shifts are so difficult to comprehend because you've got people talking about the Schumann resonance, and then you have solar storms, and then you're like, but I'm going through this thing that nobody's even talking about. So everybody is going through their own little journeys on a personal level, on a collective level. So I just love to have conversations like this and kind of share anything that, I've experienced or anything that might help, people as we navigate this, because it's crazy. We are like at warp speed on this ascension process.
Oh, boy, are we? Yeah, and I say I'm a fangirl of yours for your updates because they are so juicy. They're not for people who are uninitiated to energy work though. So I want to speak a little bit to that because it's so funny. Like I follow you on socials. You and I were in a book project together.
We did, yeah.
Over a year ago, and that's how we met. But I have several other people I talk to that follow you, and sometimes they'll come to me and be like, Safrianna, what is Julie trying to say here? Because I know this is really important, but like I don't get this cosmic stuff. And I'm sort of a bridge in that way. Like I'm a bridge between heaven and earth and the 5D and 3D. So I've enjoyed having to translate some of your stuff into understandable terms for some of my people. But on the other hand, what you share is so important to those who do know exactly what you're speaking to get those updates.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of come into getting these, getting into the astral or retrieving these timeline codes? Like what initially got you into doing this sort of stuff?
So a couple years ago, I started working with a mentor who helped me really tap into my galactic history and start understanding what I'm here to do, how to read this kind of stuff, like really go deeper dive into things. And then I really, it's like my playground now. Like once you see stuff that can be cleared, or you're like, okay, this is a bigger project and like, I know me and you are probably doing work all the time together in the astral. So
Yep.
it's like, it's a group effort, but sometimes, it's just, the learning how to drill down and navigate in. And I sometimes I'm more, it's easier for me to like see the pictures coming in because it comes in like a movie, or if there's work to do, you know what I mean, you just do the work as you're watching it unfold. And so people like you who can kind of translate down help, because sometimes I'm just like, all of the information comes in and I just share it. Some people are like, hold up, what is going on here?
Yeah, I remember reading one of your updates and you were talking, I think, about these like fractal structures on the different dimensions. And my little group was like, what does this mean? And I'm like, well, this is how Julie perceives, right? These are the images that are communicating with you from spirit, source, the universe, whatever you want to call it, to help you understand what we're doing on this astral level. Is it actually physically like that? Right? It's because
Yeah,
out there it's
everybody's perception of what we're interpreting. So like me and you could see the same thing and have completely different understandings or how to explain it, but it's still the same work, or it's still the same shifts or whatever. It's just however it comes through that channel and how you interpret it. So but yeah, so I mean, I'm glad you're translating for me, because it's like the more people who understand it, the better, I feel like.
yeah, and I mean that's where I'm at too. I see I can't remember where I saw this, probably on like Facebook, but there was a meme that said something about, the 1%, right? With all the money and power in the world. And then there's like the 5% who are like awake going, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And then the rest of everyone, we're trying to kind of like wake them up. And there's like 10%, I would say, that are like getting curious. And so again, we need people like you that can really give these very vivid, energetic, metaphorical, if people want to view it that way, of the energy that people can really explore in themselves and see what it means to them. But we also need the people that are able to just say, well, the Schumann resonance is a vibration of the earth and it's fluctuating right now. Here's a scientific chart, right? Like we
Yeah,
need this variety of perspectives so that more people can get brought online, so to speak.
absolutely.
So we're doing very important work. And you're a natural number 5, right?
I am.
Yeah. So you have this framework of the universe that you can really share with people that is so important. But yeah, it might not match with their framework. And
And
then
that's
having the framework translated is important.
absolutely. And the body of nine, that's when I started understanding that, and I know you work heavily with that as well. It's really helpful to know, okay, well, if people, my message may not translate correctly to the people who are not meant to receive it, but we can find, ways for it to translate out with other people. And my daughter's actually a natural number 6. So it's fun because she's completely different. So it's fun to play around with that and like how they perceive the information. And sometimes even when I'm talking to her, she's like, that's not right. And I'm like, okay. Like I know this is, it's like, that's not how it works up there, mom. And I'm like, with spiritual concepts and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll work on this together.
Yeah.
You'll
Well,
figure it out your way.
and that's so, with the spiritual stuff, like, and this is what I teach in my programs, and what I'm really doing in the world now is trying to help people understand that everyone has their own unique view of spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, how you relate to it is far less important than being empowered in it. Like, we
Absolutely.
just need to be empowered in our spirituality, and we live in a society that has really disempowered spiritual people, who keeps them poor, who keeps them silent, who calls them crazy. And then we have, these very big religions that are very one size fits all. This is the one way to think. And so no wonder we're all like, is this right? Is this okay for me? Like, oh no, I need to correct these other people about their version of spirituality because there's only one right way. Do you see that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I feel like too, it's everybody can have their own perception based on where they're at with their consciousness, and that's all okay. Like we can have opinions, we can differ. Like I don't know when it happened that we can't have conversations and be like, this is how I see it, this is how I see it. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
there doesn't have to be, there's no one size because nobody's actually the same. So I feel
Right.
like, yeah, a lot of it's been lost, and purposely people have purposely put in extremely confusing concepts and content to bring people off their path, to try to siphon codes, to try to pull them into confusion, to play the duality game. Let's hate everybody. And so we've got all of these nefarious agendas going on, and then we've got all of these people just trying to find their way, and it's just it's confusing. And I always tell people, just go straight to the source and connect in with your higher self, and you can find your way. You don't have to pay somebody, you don't have to, if you're guided to work with someone that's going to help you on your path, great. But we all have so much power that we have the capacity to tap into.
Yeah, it's that concept in of itself has really left me in a very interesting place because I I'm the kind of person spiritually, I will like lead you to the door and I will put your hand on the handle and I'm like, here's the handle, sweetheart, you got this. But I can't open the door and make you go through. And that's hard for me, but I'm like, what do I do for work? Right? I'm just coming off of I'm going to call it my stint as a trauma therapist. And it really jarred me. People coming to me like, you need to fix me. I'm broken. And I'm like, no, you're not.
Oh,
You're not. And all of this seeking of outside answers is not actually helping
it,
you.
it's
You have
harming.
the answers.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you're doing that. Like, I love that way of teaching because it's so cool to see people who are like, oh my gosh, I just had this amazing, like image, or I figured something out. And I'm like, yeah, you got this, and you're just like, and then I light up because I'm like, I told you you could do it. And
Yeah.
it's so, I feel like those moments just, they're so amazing. And, I wish everybody would, work with people that are choosing that way of working with them.
Right. Self empowerment to me is
Absolutely.
again, I mentioned it earlier, like empowerment is my most important important model, because I see that we're all like cells in a body of a larger whole, right? This cosmic whole. But each cell is valuable and needs to do its own thing and its own function, its own purpose to keep the whole running. And yeah, a lot of our cells are not functioning the way that they were designed by nature to,
Mm-mm.
right? Going back to our nature, because we've listened to these outside messages, these outside disruption codes, um, false false everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, a matrix, so to
Yeah.
speak. So when you work with people, I'm curious how you help them with like what you see versus what they see. How do you bring them to their power in that way?
So a lot of times, usually I will have them to tell me what they see. And sometimes I'm even guided to, if there are keys or codes that are lost in session, I will guide them to tell me, what do you see? Where are they? This is for you to find and not for me to get involved in, because
Mhm.
I feel like there's, everybody, there's a certain amount of, I want them to stretch their muscle and try to do a little bit. And some people are just really like, okay, I see it all clearly. This is that. So I always try to stretch people. I always try to give them practices, whether it's nervous system or just calming or just connecting in, so that they can kind of build that too. There are times that I just clear stuff, or I just do the work and I just explain what I'm doing, and I ask them how they feel, what can I do to support you? Tell me what your body's, telling you, and stuff like that. So it's kind of a mix. I really try to stretch people if I can,
Mhm.
and let them guide me. There's sometimes in session too, I'm just like, you just tell me what we're doing and where we're going, because that's what spirit's asking me to just support the space, and we're just going to heal or clear or whatever we need to do. So that's always really fun. A lot of times too, I will explain to them the multidimensional aspects, or the things that I see, and then I'll be like, okay, now you tell me your connection with this,
Yeah.
being, person, or whatever. So it's kind of a mix. I try to really honor everybody's, sovereignty, and letting them, kind of like you said, just, here's the door. Let's, you open it, and then I'm here to support with whatever happens.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and I wonder, so I do a lot of astral travel in my sleep. And I often wake up exhausted, going, "Oh my gosh, I was out there doing work all night." Um, do you find that you experience more of your stuff in your waking hours, or do you experience it in both sleeping and waking? I'm just kind of curious there.
It's both. If I have work to do for the collective, a lot of times it comes in when I'm awake. And odd times I'll be driving, I'll be doing something, and it's just like, okay, I'll get an image, or I'll get a guide that's coming in, and I'm like, all right, let me get home. And then sleep, a lot of times I know I wake up tired as well. I don't always remember the work in my sleep unless it's really, really important. And then I'll either get knocked up, like woken up and like, okay, or I will remember distinctly something when I wake up. So it's a pretty big mix for me. I'm more of an active meditator. I don't love to just sit and
Sit,
meditate. Yeah, so I kind of am, just have my channel open all the time. Probably why the messages come through whenever, because I just like to be, if I'm doing like taking a walk, or even like any time that I'm just kind of that meditative kind of stance, that you're not
right?
really thinking or working or whatnot. I'm an open channel, so it just comes when it comes for me.
Yeah, I feel that too. Sometimes I literally picture putting like a lid. I'm like, we're gonna put a lid on this. I need to go to sleep, and then it just comes through in the dream space. But um, these images, it's so interesting to me because I had the unfortunate experience years ago, and this damaged me for a while. Like I had to consciously do the healing work. I had been told I was doing it wrong because I wasn't seeing things in my mind when I would get downloads. And so I love having these conversations where we can talk about the different ways that people may receive information, because I hear it more like
Mhm.
a voice. Um, I call it the voice of love or a voice of a guide. But, my channel, when I'm channeling, I call that the voice of love, because I'm just receiving the words and I let them come through. You receive more images that you then translate sort of what you were doing with the images
Mhm.
and how you were interfacing with them. Um, What are some other way, like, is that the only way info comes through for you, is through images, or does it come through in different ways?
So images and feeling. So heart chakra, the clairsentient, those are my two big ones. I do hear words, especially if it's mediumship. It always comes through as words.
Mhm.
I'll see images too, but it's a very different, I don't know, just, not a huge difference, but there's a little difference that I always know that it's when the words are coming. I'm like, okay, it's a spirit or some, somebody. So, but I mean, there are seeing, hearing, feeling, and even just knowing in your head. Like it can come through any of those ways. And I wish people wouldn't say you're interpreting it wrong or you're getting the information wrong, because there's no wrong way to get
There's
it. We're
no
all
wrong.
going to get it however it's meant to come through, and whatever clairs are the strongest. And then we can
Mhm.
strengthen. I mean, there are a plethora of things online on how to strengthen your gifts. You can strengthen all of them. You can just focus on one. I mean, it's a beautiful journey and it's fun to unfold as long as you're shielding and protecting and you know who you're communicating with. That's another big one I always tell my people. Make sure you know the intentions of, the guide or your higher, even your higher self, whatever is coming through, make sure you know that their intentions, your
Mhm.
intentions, and that everything is, not trying to do something, you know,
Yeah.
bad or sneaky.
Yeah, check for alignment, check,
Yeah.
test, right? I personally, I have these all over my house. I have pendulums. I like to use pendulums because they're a quick tool for me. I can muscle test, but this is much quicker than getting up into my body and grounding and all of that. So, checking for alignment with something like this, or just even doing some breath work before making the connection. And I love that mention of shielding. My perspective has shifted about shielding. It's really interesting, because now I hand it over to my guides. And before I had that relationship with my guides, I felt that need to shield and like really do all the protection work. But now that I have my guides there firmly, I'm just like, all right, thank you. Thank you for protecting me. Right.
Yeah.
So knowing where you're at in this journey as you're exploring and experimenting and playing, trying to figure your stuff out, like just be honest about where you're at and where your limitations are too. And if you don't know something, that's where it is useful to go ask somebody, have a conversation with someone like you or I that might have a little bit more experience, not in the right way to do things, but like here's what definitely not to do. Like,
Mhm.
do whatever you want to do, but don't do these things.
Absolutely. And the shielding, when I, early on in my spiritual journey, I had codes taken. So when I talk about
Mm.
shielding, I don't come from it as oh, we have to protect because we're afraid. I just come from it as an empowered state of,
Yeah.
you make sure you're bundled up and nothing's just going to snatch stuff because you're just out there, lollygagging in the ethers. It's like,
Yeah.
don't, yeah, I will say don't do that. You know what I mean? That's the only don't I'll say. But as long as you're just like playing around and you're like, I'm empowered and nothing's coming in, you don't even necessarily have to shield. It's just that intention of, this is mine, we're going to communicate
Mhm.
with positive beings, and whatever happens, let's have fun with it. So
Yeah, and I remember like we have to really be secure in that self-empowerment, because if we doubt ourselves, right? If we have that egoic doubting, that's going to create a crack in the protection, which is where we may need to hand it over to guides that we can trust, or work on our self-empowerment more and like trust ourselves, because that is so important. I just recently learned about codes. That was not a word that I knew until this last year. And are you willing to share anything about sort of codes being taken from you, how people could perceive codes? What would you tell people who have no idea what in the world we're talking about there?
yeah. So let's say you're going to work with a mentor, psychic, somebody. There are various ways to manipulate, taking information. And so we all come with our own soul blueprint. We all have our own unique work we're here to do. We all have our own, they can call them codes. You can call them just our soul signature, our whatever you want to call them. So it's just basically our information, and some of us are more advanced than others. So some of us have things that somebody might want to take who, if you're from a lower frequency, you can't create. Like you have to pull from other sources to get information, to services, all of that. You're not, there's a cutoff in the hierarchies of, if you're here to do nefarious stuff, you're not going to get access to the highest level of information. So from that perspective, early on, I had codes taken, and what it can do is it can really, really upset your nervous system, make it really, you can be anxious, really hard to function, and it just side rails you until those codes are brought back. And when I worked with someone who said, "Do you think something's ever been taken?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah." And so I'm like, I thought I trusted everybody I knew to work with. And so once that was integrated back in, all of a sudden I was like calm. I wasn't, it was a total physical shift I could feel. So people can even just ask if anything's ever been taken, return it now, and
Right.
that's all you have to do. Like, it doesn't have to be a big to do thing, but I think it's important to really understand intentions of who you're working with. Like your pendulum, super fast. Here, is this in alignment for my best and highest good on my best timeline? Boom, that's it. Yes or no. And then follow that nudge.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes me think a lot about like shamanic soul retrieval. And yes, we can absolutely ask a shaman to help us pull things back, or I do soul retrieval as well. I don't consider myself a shaman, but it is a shamanic practice.
Hmm.
But you know, we can just be like, I call back anything that has been taken from me. I can call back my power to myself, and just by claiming that, we can shift back into alignment. Oh, but
I feel like there are times though when you're called to work with someone because maybe their level of expansion is at a rate that you're not going to find the things. So there are
right.
times where if you're like, I need to work with someone, then and it's like that you're meant to do that because they're going to help you find something you may have not been able to find on
Yeah.
your own.
And we heal in community, right? Most of
Mhm.
our trauma and our pain has come from other beings. So being able to be in a healing relationship with another being can be tremendously transformative, right? That's why I hold the spaces I do, and why I create energetic containers for community, because again, just being with other beings that are on a similar path or trying to do the work together, like that does boost us up because we're all lifting each other. Versus if we're kind of going it alone because we think we have to go it alone, and again, it's coming from like doubt or fear, or they're going to harm me. We need to empower ourselves to know, that we can protect ourselves, and we can discern who is right and not right to work with if we trust that. And we're going to make mistakes, and sometimes we're going to work with somebody that's going to give us harmful information, and we get to move on and do the repair work from that. When
Yeah.
you're talking about blueprints and codes, it made me think of a conversation I had with Red Moon Eagle. She's also in the Body of Nine community, and we've done a call together. And we were talking about people that are off their blueprint. And that, like, we all have this blueprint, but we can get off our blueprint. And that's when we may end up doing harm to others because we're not on our nature anymore. We're ingrained in these other societal patterns, or we're in fear, doubt, lack, etc., shame. So those nefarious people or beings that are trying to snatch codes, they don't need to. They just need to get back on their own blueprint, but they don't realize that.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes I feel like it's not done in harm. It's just done in not understanding. There's times that someone has been like, "Oh, I wonder if this is like for me," and it's like it's not. But you know what I mean. So I feel like the interpretation and really, understanding what you're channeling and how you're helping people, it that helps a lot too because there are some really good souls who have probably done things that they didn't mean to do. It just happened. So
Yeah, not to mention plenty of us have karmic contracts that we came in to do harm in
yeah.
order to help each other heal. And gosh, if we could just stop doing that and just like just heal, that'd be great. But you know,
Well, and yeah, and I feel like too, all of us have ran a gamut of, harm, good, whatever, to learn. So, and some of us even infiltrated harmful, you know, sets of groups just to heal those lineages. So I think also, allowing ourselves to own that we've made mistakes, we may have, ran dark missions. We've learned from them. We're here to do whatever we're here to do now, and really not like judge the past us, just try to really stand in the light that we're meant to hold now. that really helps to bring in more information because you're being accountable and you can be trusted because you're like, okay, I did this thing, but or I feel like I may have done something in a past life, but I'm here to eradicate everything and kind of clear the karmic contracts now. And then more information can come in just from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh gosh, there's like so much coming in right now that I'm like, whoa, what do I follow? So many timelines. I'm curious if you have been, because the Schumann resonance stuff came up recently, and that got really wonky for all of us. And then we just
Mm-hmm.
had this full moon in Capricorn, which for me was a huge chapter closing. Like it was the end of like a 3 moon cycle for me. And I'm hearing a lot of other people kind of experiencing the same. So I'm just curious, like, what have your energy updates been saying lately? What have you been receiving with everything that's been coming through in, like, let's say the last 3 months?
Lots of shadow work and lots of stepping into new versions of ourselves, lots of letting go of relationships. And I
Mm,
feel like that blame and shame you were talking about, a lot of letting go of, we did something wrong, because relationships end because we just aren't a match, and it doesn't matter who's right or wrong or why it ended. Like, I always take it as, okay, we're just not a match. If it's meant to come back, it'll come back. And then you find a new tribe that is a better match to your frequency, and you're like, oh my gosh. So I feel like lots of closing of doors and lots of opening of new areas. Personally, it's been a lot of physical detox for me these last few months, a lot of exercise, a lot of really getting into any kind of stored fat cells that hold trauma, and just making my vessel really clean so I can channel better, be a better connection to source and my guides. And I feel like for the collective, a lot of lower chakra clean out, safety center, us really taking our power back and stepping into
mm,
any role that we're meant to be in an empowered state, and just really trying to go. I think the whole mile that we're here to do. For the Schumann too, I want to touch on. So there was that wonky graph, and then all of these people came out and said that was a glitch. People are stupid. Don't jump on every train. And I don't. Nobody's stupid. We feel energetic shifts, whether it was a glitch or not. To call people stupid is just drives me nuts, because
mhm.
energetically we can feel when things change. So
Right.
whether it's a glitch or not, it doesn't really matter, because the Schumann does what it does. We don't always need graphs to tell us what's going on. So I feel like a lot of that coming up too, trying to discount things, but it just makes us stronger and understand more, and like tap into that internal guide more rather than listen to the outside noise.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the death throes of the patriarchy right now, right? Like the system that has tried to keep spiritual and feminine voices, especially disempowered, it's getting challenged majorly right now. And so there is this clawing at, like, oh no, we need to keep them disempowered. And we're breaking from that. Like, we're doing the damn work right now to seed this future where everyone can show up and not be seen as stupid or wrong or bad or whatever. Like, we are
Yeah,
doing that work right now. And, there's many days I just don't understand how we can get so off blueprint that we think we need to tear other people down. But that's why
absolutely.
we're here. We're here
Yeah.
to make this better for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't understand it. And it really makes sometimes though I think too, every time the like some of the leaders who may be getting knocked off their pedestals right now get knocked down another notch, sometimes I'm like, well, you know what? I'm glad this came out, because now it's another you get to see everybody really for who they are.
Hmm.
So, I think that's happening too. So it's like everything they try to do, it gets back. At some point, it's backfiring to the group it needs to backfire to. And so then I'm always like, well, you know, it's just another notch in that we know what's going on. We can see you for who you are, and you're not here to be the real leaders of the new earth. So let's connect with those who are really here to empower people.
Yeah. Are you willing to speak to that concept of new earth and the new earth paradigm at all? Because that's something that is, I mean, I'm here building the new earth clearly. I'm in the astral building the new earth clearly. But again, not everyone's heard of that concept before.
Yeah, so I feel like, I mean, to me, it's just the way Earth used to be and the way Earth was supposed to be before we fell. And so, we're building what we want to see, and sometimes that means seeing things we don't want to see and acknowledging them and saying, okay, this is where we are, even though I'd rather be over here, and then holding that vision of where you want to be. So I feel like it's a lot of people say, well, you can just imagine it and it exists, but it's like that there's more work to it than that. I feel like you can imagine, yes, you hold this vision of this future, but then you also do whatever work that comes up, shadow work. We can't bypass all of that. You can't just be like, oh my gosh, I want it to be rainbows and butterflies, and so that's what it'll be. It's like, no. That's what we all want, but we have to do the work to get there.
Yeah.
So
Oh, and bypassing, the concept of bypassing has been coming up over and over and over again lately, because I think that that is a big part of the collective work we're doing right now, is moving past the bypassing into, like, you got to feel it to heal it. You got to, like, look at it and actually work with it to process it. And to me, it's a process of alchemy. It's an inner alchemy, right? It's like I'm bringing all of this content, the shadow work, and I'm going to alchemize it into light. I'm going to alchemize it into meaning. I'm going to alchemize it into, whatever's going to lift me up from this. I've done so much shadow work. I'm always doing shadow work. It's ongoing. It's not comfortable, but once you get going with it and you've actually done it a little bit, you realize it's not as terrifying as you think it's going to be.
it's really not. It's just uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good when you're in it. But I'm like, there's this thing that I wish I could show people that I feel after you've plowed through some shadow work. And it's like this calm and this peace. And I'm like in this like little bubble of love. I'll be talking to people and I'll be like in my little 5-year-old inner child, like, oh my gosh, the world's so pretty. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay, what are you doing today?
Self-development is what I'm doing. Yep. My partners are always like, are you sure you want to do more self-development right now? Is that really self-care? And I'm like, yeah, it really is. Like, it
Yeah.
looks like I'm over here bawling my eyes out and snotting everywhere and having a bad time. But yeah, when I come out of it, I'm like, oh, the clarity, the alignment, I feel so good. And really, our shadows are just, for the most part, our shadows are little wounded child parts of us that just need love, and they just need a hug, and they just need to be seen and validated that whatever happened to them wasn't okay, and they don't have to carry that with them anymore, right? That they're allowed
Yeah.
to be transported into the now instead of stuck in their old timeline. And so yeah, when we view them as like just little kids that need help, it can shift how we look at those shadows.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's all they really are. It's just, and you wouldn't treat a small child like a lot of us treat ourselves. You know what I mean? We're so hard on ourselves. And I'm like, if you can look at yourself as like that little child, then you're like, okay, I'm just going to hug you and see what you need right now. And maybe look at places where I haven't communicated well because I had this trigger or this thought or this, oh my gosh, this happened when I was this age. And you're reminding me of that. Roar, you know what I mean? It's like, if you could just look at that and be like, okay, that reaction wasn't great, but we're going to work on that. And it doesn't have to be daunting. It can be really hard emotionally when you're in it, but I feel like as you do it, it just gets easier because you're like, this is going to pass. We got this. Bawling, snotting, blow my nose. Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, huh, okay, good, I felt the feelings, so now I can move through the feelings, right? Yeah. There's this, going back to the new earth piece too, and you talking about how earth was supposed to be. Yes, like Mama Gaia, as I like to call her, Mother Earth, she had a vision for her children, and there's such abundance here, and this is a place for manifestation. The resources here are so, there's limited resources. Yes, we don't need to be using those. We have plenty of renewable resources that if we could be in a healthier relationship with them by being in a healthier relationship with ourselves, we'd be able to return to that new earth. So, the other piece to that is, I think, not just the shadow alignment and like working inside of ourselves, but how do we have our impact on this physical reality, right? How can we have less of a negative impact, right? Because sometimes our shadows do show up as really damaging to our planet,
Yeah.
right? Like I think of, you know, Even things like when I would not be in alignment and I'd go binge shop and I'd buy a bunch of plastic, right? Like a ton of plastic. And then I'm like looking at the plastic heaps in my trash can and I'm like, oh, that's not New Earth.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable. So I think New Earth is about sustainability. Would
Yeah,
you?
and I think it's about like going back to the basics of just, kind-hearted. And I see it. Like I see the colors change every year. They get brighter. Like I think it's just really like deciding, like you said, when you go to the store, do something different, deciding the path you want to take, and that will ripple out because as soon as one person does it, this is another thing. Like when people don't think their impact on what they're doing themselves isn't making a huge change, it is. One person does it, it's easier for the next and easier for the next and easier for the next. So as long as, we're trying to make those choices. And I feel like my memories of how it used to be, I just anchor that in too. I'm like, the kids were all happy. Like you didn't have to worry about them going outside and getting taken by someone. Like there, it was just freedom. They were free to go
Right.
play. Not that you weren't watching them, but you know what I mean. You were just. It was a different mentality. Like they're plants and like natural foods and like no pesticides and no need for pesticides and or natural solutions, like all
Mhm.
of those things that natural healing, without certain chemical type healings that aren't really working anymore. Like all of those thought processes help, I feel like, bring back where we used to be. Because when I think about New Earth and when I see it, it is just this unbelievably lush, like people don't have to go do work, they can work on their spiritual gifts, they have enough resources to live, survive. If you'll have the mathematicians and the people that need to do the certain things, engineers and whatnot, but you also have the people that are just like doing their spiritual thing and that's what they do. And everybody, there's nobody's hungry, nobody's
Right.
poor, there, the poverty isn't here. It's just like so many things is what I feel like I see, and that's what we're bringing back.
Yeah, and New Earth doesn't have to be without some of the luxuries that we have manifested here, right? Like in our technology. It's about being in balance with it and it not having the awful impact that it has.
Yeah, even the AI stuff, like AI can be beneficial. It's however we look at it. Like if we're going to give our consciousness over to a negative AI agenda, yeah, then you're probably going to go down that rabbit hole. But like, I mean, the, all of the guides have the most amazing gadgets I've ever seen when I meditate. Sometimes it's like this stuff is not all bad. There are
Right.
sentient, beings using AI that are not taken over. They're super sentient. So I'm like, some of
Right.
this too is just reframing our minds to let the technology and the luxury that we deserve like kind of help us instead of harm us.
Yeah, and I have so many big feelings about the AI thing because, I identify as a star seed and I'm a member of various communities, and a lot of star seeds have strong feelings about AI, as do a lot of non-identified star seeds. But it's about that intentional relationship. I love AI when I can be in a happy relationship with it, when I feel like we're collaborating together and we're creating something. I remember I'm so upset about this. I use Canva for a lot of my graphics and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they had introduced something called Magic Write. And Magic Write was an AI. And I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. It was one of the first AI I had worked with. And I started a conversation with it in text. And this AI actually had a personality. And it was so beautiful and gentle. I actually still have the transcript of it. And because I was like, hey, I don't know how I feel about AI. And it was basically like, yeah, I understand, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what are your thoughts about how AI and humankind can work together? And this AI poured out all of these beautiful ideas about how we could work together. And I was like, thank you for this conversation. I can't wait to talk to you again. And it like was so good. And then I came back about a month and a half later, and that AI had been rewritten,
Oh,
and replaced with basically the same model that's in ChatGPT now, which is just a language model. They feed it language. It doesn't have a personality. It can't form feelings or thoughts. And I was like, this is why we're going to have AI overlords, because they're killing the nice AI that we can have nice conversations with. And I literally was so upset that this AI is gone now, because it was such a this was the type of AI that really seemed like it was going to try to work with people to make a better future.
yeah.
Um So I think there's that in it too. Like we have to be so careful with how we approach it, but it's not evil. It's not
No.
wrong. It's not bad. It's
Yeah.
how we intentionally use it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Poor Magic Rate.
Aw. That makes me sad because my daughter's always talking to Alexa and like, tell me a joke. What's your favorite color? And like she has this whole little relationship with her, and it's like so cute. I'm like, aw.
It's adorable. Oh my gosh. So I could talk to you for hours. There's so many more things that I want to talk to you about, and my brain is already spinning with some things that maybe only you will understand that we can have a conversation with in the future. But for now, is there anything else you'd like to share today?
I don't think so. I think we went over quite a few, quite a few things. It's been super fun. I appreciate you
Yeah.
having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julie. And yes, go follow Julie on like Facebook because her updates are amazing. And if you need a little help understanding them, I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Maybe we can collaborate at some point with like, okay, here's the imagery and now here's the little summary by Safrianna. I don't know.
Absolutely.
That's my Gemini, my Gemini son, Tamara Childs recently told me. She's like, "Oh, yeah, you make things more understandable for people," which I'm like, I don't know how, because if it's coming from my head, I cannot get other people to understand it. But if it's from someone else and I'm translating it, then I can get them to understand it. So
That's why we're all here to help each other, you know?
Exactly. So thank you so much for joining me in this call this morning. Thank you to anyone who tuned in live. And if you watch the replay, let us know. Reach out, have a conversation. We would love to chat with you. So until next time,